Welcome to the third season of the Ashlars podcast. We are thrilled about our progress and, more importantly, grateful for your support and encouragement. We are going in strong with ever more energy and passion into the third season of our humble little initiative. That is, to show the true light of Freemasonry by being India's first and only podcast on Freemasonry. In this season, we continue to highlight papers by Indian Masons and showcase the wealth of Masonic knowledge and wisdom in India. Additionally, we will also shine some light on various other degrees beyond the craft, with a view to help Masons discover the true joy of being a Mason and expand their horizons. As a disclaimer, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely of the participants and do not represent any official positions, including those of any Grand Lords or constituents thereof. Best efforts have been made to keep the conversation on the level for brethren and non-Masons alike.
Good evening, brethren. The topic is Hidden Mysteries of Nature and Science. When I started, the first thing that came to mind was what should be the opening line. And when I was pondering over it, I thought of a caterpillar. A caterpillar on the leaf. The whole world is the leaf for the caterpillar. Nothing beyond, not even the next leaf. The focus is so much on that particular leaf and to keep devouring the leaf. In fact, so much so that it does not wish to even tell the other caterpillar there as to what else is there, or inquire of the other caterpillar what else is there around us. There is only one focused job, that of nibbling on the leaf. Then by some strange coincidence, if the caterpillar happened to, if I may use the allegory again here, to knock on the door of the lodge, then it might find that there is yet another leaf. And there are many more leaves. And then there is a tree there. And then there are many more trees. And there's a forest all around. Then it may so happen that once again, this caterpillar may tell the next caterpillar, look, there's so much around us. So why are we only obsessed with this nibbling here? There are many more things that we could do. Many more things around us. Then the others would, in their ignorance or in their focused, I won't call it ignorance, because they do not even know what else is there. Therefore, I can't even say that they're ignorant. In their focused concentration on nibbling on that leaf, would just tell the other, forget about all that, just nibble at the leaf. And then comes the next stage, but which, unlike us, where we are aware of our respective stages in life, when the caterpillar moves on to the stage of a butterfly, then it sees the whole world around it. And then its perception changes. And then the same questions will not be asked again, one from the other. So moving on from the very narrow world in which each one lives, or those who did not knock at the doors of Freemasonry for that matter, I would then like to start off by saying this. This phrase, which is the topic for the day, for me, and for the little while that I'll engage you, when speculative Freemasonry was taking shape in England during the late 17th and early 18th century, many prominent members were the founding scholars of the Royal Society, the frontier of the scientific revolution, and other Newtonian sciences. Now, this was very much in vogue, where people went about knowledge based only on reason. The quest then was based on reason. That was the era. And it was during that era that, as far as Freemasonry Freemasonry was concerned, that the ritual came to be written. It found its form. Of course, I'll just point out this, that since the material is considerable and there was a slight mismatch about the time, I'll be encapsulating it as we go on. And so what we see here is Freemasonry uses phrases like the hidden mysteries of nature and science in a symbolic and philosophical sense, and points to a search for deeper truths about existence, about humanity, universe, the divine order, underlying the self, underlying the reality for the purpose of improvement of the self. In traditional Masonic writings, especially from the 18th and 19th centuries, the phrase refers to exploring moral truth, understanding humanity's relationship to the universe, studying philosophy, geometry, ethics, and natural law, personal self-improvement, and enlightenment, symbolic interpretation of nature and creation. To early Masons, science did not mean cold materialism. It meant using human reason to decipher the universe. In the Fellowcraft degree, the candidate is specifically instructed to study the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Geometry is considered the noblest of these sciences as far as Freemasonry goes. It is the foundation. By studying the laws of geometry and nature, a Mason is taught to trace nature through her various windings to her most concealed forms. The hidden aspect simply refers to things that are not yet understood. There is no secrecy about it. By an untrained mind, but are laid bare through dedication and education. For example, geometry is especially important to Masonic symbolism because builders and stonemasons of past relied on it, and it became a metaphor for the order. Geometry seemed to be a constant factor in the quest to understand the nature of Freemasonry and really emphasize the science aspect in the quest for answers. From the American Duncan's Ritual of Freemasonry, published in 1866, the following words would very much qualify this. By geometry, we may curiously trace nature through her various windings to her most concealed recesses. By it, we discover the power, the wisdom, and the goodness of the grand artificer of the universe, and view with delight the proportions which connect this vast machine. By it, we discover how the planets move in their different orbits and demonstrate their various revolutions. By it, we account for the return of the seasons and the variety of scenes which each season displays to the discerning eye. Numerous worlds are around us, all formed for the same divine artist, and which roll through the vast expanse and are all conducted by the same unerring law of nature. A survey of nature and the observation of her beautiful proportions first determined man to imitate the divine plan, the study of symmetry and order. This gave rise to societies and birth to every useful art. The architect began to design, and the plans which he laid down, being improved by experience and time, have produced works which are the admiration of every age. At that time, the state of science and discovery and the incredible advances made in the last 200 years were considered. Was modern science that which we as Freemasons were expected to explore? But this would not necessarily be in a particular Masonic attribute, being a trait open to all men and women who are non-Masons. He continued, however, when we consider the amazing exploration of space which has been afforded by various probes, in particular the Hubble telescope and later the James Webb telescope, producing fantastic images of how the universe developed, we are now able to look at the universe some billions of light years away, to look at galaxies that have formed and died. We may ask, will it enable us to see the possible origins of the universe? Now we are coming closer to what is there, which is, what is the purpose of life? What is life? What is creation? Where did it begin? Who is the creator? And if there is a creator, then a question may be asked, coming very close to heresy, that who created the creator and where did it begin? Therefore, there is no limit to what is to be explored in what is hidden, as was slightly mentioned when Brother Muthu said one facet of it. Each one will view it in his own light, each one will expand it. The mind is not bound by the constraints of time or space. The human brain is not. It will allow it. And then it is not just the human brain. We have to see what is beyond just what the brain gives the stimulus. What is more than the brain? We call, there is a soul. There is the ethereal. There are far too many different words which have been coined, which would not limit it, because if the brain alone were to limit it, then the various phrases which are there, the various charges which are there, the various explanations which are there, and the various ceremonies which are there, are all to be tested, viewed, analyzed only on the touchstone of the brain. The brain then, though limitless, would still limit it. It is something beyond that, but what is it? That itself is another fundamental question as to what are the tools which will be used in this quest. What is hidden? In fact, this hidden part has several facets again. Hidden from the candidate himself. In various stages, it is revealed. Apart from the fact that the content itself has the straightforward wordings, the phrases, the words, it also has an allegory attached to it. It also has a dual meaning attached to it, which is very obvious. But beyond that, it has something more than that. And that is the inner meaning. And once you use the expression inner meaning, what is beyond what is written there has no limit then. And as was said earlier, and which is going to be again a fundamental thing, but that the fundamental thing is this: it is each one unto his own. There cannot be a set rule or a set interpretation for any of these things. Each one will get his own interpretation, his own wordplay, as was the trimester example, which is a beautiful one. So each thing each person can evolve, and each person does evolve. Then some commonly discussed mysteries in Masonic tradition include nature of soul and consciousness, the symbolic meaning of life and death, the search for wisdom, the nature of morality and virtue, and spiritual laws governing life, the harmony of the universe, human relationships with the universe, human consciousness and spiritual development, ancient symbols and allegories, and the like. These, the different branches and higher degree systems, such as Scottish Rite, add layers of symbolism which were drawn on these from ancient Egypt, biblical stories, medieval stonemason traditions, alchemy, Hermeticism, and Kabbalah. In fact, while going through, I could not resist the Egyptian basis of many of our rituals and many of the explanations which are there. In the Egyptian part of it, it was pointed out, when Osiris died, the god, Isis and Nephthys in turn tried to raise him, but it proved a failure. Then Anubis attempted it and succeeded, and Osiris returned to the world with the secrets of Amenti, a significant statement which seems to suggest that the secrets which we possess are closely connected with the underworld and the life after death. This is from an extract from the Book of the Dead. It's too much to even get into it for a brief discussion on this. But what it shows is that the origins of what we have as our rituals and the hidden mysteries that we have to go through, whether it's mysteries of nature and science, when we have to go beyond that to explore that, the exploration goes and finds its antecedents way back in the Egyptian tradition itself. And there it is said that it was because Moses was a part of the Egyptians and he became a part of them, that he carried that to beyond the Sinai, and then it became part of the Jewish tradition. And it is there in the Jewish tradition that the temple of King Solomon replaced the house of light, the pyramid at Giza. So earlier they used to use that. So the symbols change, the allegories change, but the focus remains to an extent. And if these symbols change, yet the basis on which Freemasonry has moved has not moved very far from that. It was only, if I may say so, tailored for the geographical move. And there itself, also the book of the material says, which I was able to extract, that it goes like this. It says, in this case, the Egyptians spoke of the Great Pyramid of Giza as the house of light, or more commonly, the light. But the Jews were taught to interpret it as referring to the Temple of Solomon. And then it was pointed out that the practices that were brought about were not quite alien to that which Moses had after bringing it beyond the Sinai, in the region also. And there's an entire narrative that that whole region also had practices which were akin to this. So the tools also changed. So if the tools change, the tools will also result in creating a different thought process. Because what was used, the ritual is the basis. That's the fundamental basis from where research will be carried out. You are permitted to carry out this research. And this is in phases. When this research goes on in phases, it is from the first degree. We presume that from the first degree, the next meeting is the second degree, and the third meeting is the third degree. That is our presumption. And that is the fact of the time. But it need not necessarily or ought to be that. It could be and ought to be probably, we do not know, again these are thoughts, that a person should be allowed to linger in that one stage. These stages were not made hop, skip and jump. These stages would have been there, each of these degrees, the first, second and the third, you've only knocked and come in. After that, you have gone through an experience. We allow the experience to assimilate, allow it to sink. And there are only 3 degrees to sink in for a lifetime of Freemasonry. So if that is the case, then why should the first degree, once you traverse to the second, you feel that there's nothing more left of the first to be reflected upon. But even there, in each of the charges, and the extracts are there, I could read some of them, but I'm sure all of you are far too familiar with the sentences there, which says every time it talks about the mysteries up to that stage. And in fact, that's why I reserved only one para, which I want to point out. Unless it be to him or them, my own handwriting becomes very difficult for me to read unless I've been able to. After strict examination, and not even to him or them until after, who are lawfully entitled, and not even to him or them until after due trial, strict examination of full, that they are worthy of that confidence. Therefore, it means that if a person has passed the degree and is entitled to the next, or he has completed everything and he is entitled to whatever else that may be due, but still, if it is found that he does not merit or has not yet acquired that knowledge, then he is again not entitled to. So it doesn't mean that if you have completed the ceremony of initiation and then the next, of course you have the questions, and that we are on, again, that cannot be a statement, because we are on the hidden mysteries. So the formal part, the wording says, if you answer the questions, you are eligible for the next. If you failed there, the master would have said, bad luck. The deacons couldn't prompt well, or the DOC couldn't do a good job. We cannot go through this ceremony or make it a charade. So it becomes necessary, therefore, that a person be allowed. Forget about the fact that we are going to seek or demand that does he know or not. But in the first instance, we should allow the candidate who has just been initiated to assimilate whatever experience he has had, because he's going to have only 3 experiences. So let him have his experience in one, and on that, the foundation is laid for the next. Without that, it could not be. Then I would like to share a few more. Mysteries are considered hidden because they must be experienced and realized inwardly, not merely explained intellectually. The intellectual explanation is also an interpretation. It won't be just what is the line or the phrase in the ritual, but it goes one step beyond that. It still provides an interpretation. So somebody is giving his gyan on it. Each one may give his own respective interpretation, but there can be plenty of it. That's why we have this kind of, it almost borders on the pejorative, your gyan, because it is yours. It may be right, it may be wrong. It is the person's prerogative to have that interpretation, that view on that aspect. And to be more serious on any of these, whether it be a charge or an explanation or a phrase therein, it still means that it is your research. So your research, if it is there, it's not just, if it was just a plain search and then a perfunctory thing, then it is okay. You are to delve into it. And why are you to delve in it? There is a portion where I would like to then go into. That is, it says we deal with the various tools that are there. So Freemasonry communicates these mysteries primarily through symbols. Jacob's ladder, the square and the compass, the pillars, King Solomon's temple, light and darkness imagery, a very significant aspect in Freemasonry, and the working tools of the stonemasons. Now, these symbols are intended to deal with moral, intellectual, spiritual aspects and to guide in that. Now, going to Jacob's ladder, that provided a very interesting, and I would just take another 5 to 7 minutes more. The ancient systems educated their initiates about the existence of different planes or levels of reality interconnected like the rungs of a ladder, sometimes symbolized as Jacob's ladder. Freemasonry has retained this symbolism through many modern Freemasons may be unaware of the full depth of the meaning. Jacob's ladder, as presented in Masonic symbolism, represents more than just a moral ascent. It is a cosmological image of both involution, the descent of spirit into matter, and evolution, the ascent back to the spirit. Each rung represents a stage in this journey, both for the individual soul and for the universe as a whole. The concept of evolution was familiar to the ancients, who recognized the upward trend of life through all its forms, from the mineral to the human. This process, however, is accompanied by an equal and opposite process of involution, symbolized by the descending light. Now, the dynamic interplay of forces governs both the visible and the invisible aspects of the world. No man hath ascended up to heaven, but he who came down from heaven. That's the way it goes. The rungs of the ladder symbolize the various stages of life's journey. And we're moving more towards the fundamental question. Both on an individual and cosmic scale. Life moves through the cycles of birth and death, waking and sleeping, with growth in between. This waking in between and sleeping, again, is sleeping with regard to the caterpillar. It is sleeping in its own domain. It is awake. It is doing its job, but it is sleeping. Awake would mean, what is being awake? We are all awake at this point of time. But awakening in its sense as we again understand it. Life and birth, again, the 2 points. How do we view that also? Death and birth and rebirth. So death and moving on to the cycle of rebirth as it's believed. Rebirth has also been in different forms, as many beliefs point out. And I would like to draw on that to say that rebirth need not necessarily be just a process, but it goes beyond. It is part of the evolutionary process. And therefore, that belief in rebirth would be to that extent controlled, or maybe even a part of, a subset of the exercise of evolution. Its birth is understood. But I would even draw on that expression rebirth and say that rebirth also, since we follow all scriptures, and each scripture would have a different way of dealing with certain aspects, and say there is the concept of rebirth, then that rebirth would be again on a higher plane. Sometimes it has been described also on a lower plane also. But could that be a mutation of evolution? It could also be a negative mutation. Mutation need not always be a positive mutation. So it could be any of these. Therefore, in going by that stream, involution and evolution has been made to be a fundamental creed in the existence of humanity vis-a-vis the universe. The ancient Sufi poet, I would like to quote, Jalaluddin Rumi, captures this philosophy with his famous words. From the moment I came into the world of existence, and this fascinated me, a ladder was placed before me that I might escape. I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and became an animal. I died as an animal and became a man. It's the evolutionary process. When did I ever grow smaller by dying? And here smaller would not mean size. Smaller would mean something which is less. I shall die as a man, and this is where the change occurs. That's why from the mineral to where does he move? I shall die as a man to become an angel. So he's moved to a slightly higher plane. And then says, I shall die from angelhood to enter the ocean of being where I came from. And if my body has aged, what matter? Again, as the body withers. For the soul is eternally young. I would think the most appropriate thing to do would be forget about the rest and stop here, because I think this captures the essence of the entire exercise of our quest for the hidden mysteries. And hidden is not because it is hidden, as we said. Hidden is only to be uncovered. And to uncover is the easiest thing. I just remove this covering from on top of this object and it is uncovered. And it ceases to be hidden. That is the exercise. But then when I after uncovering it, I may then, it has a zip attached to it. I may open that zip and then see what is inside there. And then after I see that, I take out the object which is inside that zipped bag and then look at that and then see what is that which is inside there. And then I can go on and on with that. So the most beautiful part of this is, and since I had used some, put in a word there, I'd like to close with that particular sentence. But if it is not fully ready for the evening, it will not be found. And therefore I will say that the essence of it is that our ritual is so beautiful that it is enough to see a man through not one life, but even beyond.
That's all, folks. We sincerely hope that you liked our episode and got a glimpse into the fascinating world of Freemasonry. If you have any queries about what we have shared on the podcast or about Freemasonry in general, please check out the show notes for links to the Grand Lodge of India's website, or write us an email, which is theashlars@gmail.com.